Hi, right, what we're going to do this evening is have a go at cooking some Hot Pockets. I've cooked this recipe before, so I know it vaguely works. It's a case now of making it nice and simple. Rather than knead all the dough to make the bread stuff, I cheat, I use my bread maker, stick it onto its dough setting. But I've found if I let the dough rise as long as you do for a bread, which is about an hour and a half, it tends to be too elastic. So I only let it, I go through the first knead phase, I stop the machine after about 50 minutes. So that was 1 cup of water. Now we'll add 3 cups of flour, so that's 6 of these measures. Using just normal white bread flour here. Seems to have worked fairly well on the previous recipes, so I carry on. What's that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put that aside. Now, next, 1/4 cup of sugar. There we go, 1/4 cup of sugar. 1/4 cup of dried milk. There we go. 1 teaspoon of salt. And 2½ teaspoons of yeast. I'm using just an easy bake one. Works well enough for the bread, and it seems to have worked well enough for the previous ones. Should say the water was slightly warm, so I boiled the kettle and then just let it sit for 5 minutes. It just helps with getting the yeast working quickly. Now it's just a case of switch on the machine. Off she goes on the knead phase. I'll wait about 15 minutes and we'll come back and we'll actually start doing the rolling out and go through the fillings. Okay, here we are, 15 minutes later, nice round ball of dough, nice and squishy, well kneaded, and you can see it's got quite a nice texture. So what I need to do next is just roll around in the flour so it doesn't stick to us all the time. Then split it up into 10 equal segments, so usually pat it out into a shape that's easier to divide. And using my trusty knife, just divide it up into its pieces. What I usually do, split it in half, then I sort of lengthen it out into a bit of a sort of sausagey shape, and then I'll split that one into 5, so we'll guess there, and there. Doesn't have to be exactly accurate. You just want sort of 10 lumps of dough that you can roll out on the pastry board in a little bit. That's 5. Now do the same with the other half. You can of course double the recipe up if you so wish, but I've only got a fairly small kitchen, so trying to sort of do like double this amount would be a bit difficult. So, out there, 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 and there. Right, so that's that stage. Next part is the fillings. As you can see, all very neatly. Whilst the dough was kneading, took some ham out of the fridge, the remains of the packet before it's gone off. Don't have to use particularly expensive ham. In fact, this is one of those recipes you can find those reduced end of counter ones and use those. So split the ham out into 10 roughly equal sections. You want just under about an ounce, 20 grams for each Hot Pocket. Same again with some cheese. And then it's just a case of adding that. What I quite like in my recipe is I've got some tomato salsa, and I've just added a few mixed herbs to it to give it a bit more taste, and I stick like 1 teaspoon of that in the middle of each hot pocket as well. So roll out the hot pockets. Rolling out, pretty easy. Make sure your boards are nice and floury, get a bit of flour onto the rolling pin so it doesn't stick, and off you go. What you want to create is a fairly sort of rectangular shape. Doesn't have to have exactly straight sides, but it's the case then of once you get a reasonable shape that you think you can fold up into that'll fit the contents that you've laid out. You can do other things. I've done pepperoni versions before, they've been quite nice. So it's whatever you think you might fancy in a hot sandwich. So once I've got that shape, just stick ham in, cheese in, another teaspoon of sauce just to sort of add a bit of difference to it. Fold over the sides, like so. Fold over the ends, and there we have our first hot pocket. What I usually do, just set that to the side, and I'll do another one. Usually after these have baked, I tend to bag them up and freeze them. I'll show you how I bag them up later. But they only take 15-20 minutes to bake. And you just want to sort of make sure that they've gone lightly gold brown. Occasionally you get the odd one where if you've not sealed it reasonably well, the cheese leaks out. But it just adds to the sort of the homemade variety of them. Usually if one comes out not quite so good as the others, that's the one I eat just after baking them. Sneaky. To try and avoid the leak, what you want to try and do is get a bit of an overlap between both sides and then just tuck up the ends. Right, so that took about 5 minutes. The magic of TV. Now it's just a case of put the hot pockets onto a greased tray. You put them seam down, that helps to hold the seams down. Usually with this tray I can't fit all 10 on, so what I tend to do is fit 5 or 6 on, then can put it in the oven. Let's go into the oven, preheat your oven, 180 degrees Celsius or about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and they should cook for about 15-20 minutes, so we'll come back, we'll have a look at those in about 15 minutes time. Okay, so that's the first batch of 6 cooked. As you can see, they all come out sort of various different shapes and sizes, and that's half the appeal of them. You do quite often get a little bit of leakage at the back. That's usually where you've sort of not wrapped them across enough, but it's fine, they're rustic. So what you do now, leave those on the cooling tray, let them cool down for about 5-10 minutes. I've pre-cut some sheets of greaseproof paper, so I'll wrap them, each one in its own piece of greaseproof paper. I usually put 2 in a standard Ziploc bag, and then they can go in the freezer once they're nice and cold. So we'll let those cool down for about 10-15 minutes. The other batch is now in the oven. So, second batch is now cooked, they're cooling now. The first batch is cooled, so I can wrap them up, stick them in the bags. Usually stick 2 in each Ziploc. And they freeze quite well, actually. For defrosting, you just normally defrost on full power for about a minute, and they normally come out warm. What you need to use will vary according to your microwave, so yeah, first time you defrost one, do make sure that it's actually hot in the middle. You don't want to be eating sort of a hot outside with a cold semi-frozen inside.